The screams piercing through the Lagos night weren't coming from a main road. They echoed from deep within the Ogun forest, where no one should have been at 2 in the morning. Kemi Adebayo's voice cracked as she begged into the darkness, her 3-year-old daughter Funmi clinging to her chest, while twin babies wailed in her trembling arms. "Please, Tund, don't leave us here. I'm your wife." But the red taillights of her husband's Mercedes were already disappearing between the trees, leaving only the sound of crickets and her children's cries. What would you do if you walked in on this kind of betrayal? Hit like if you've been through domestic betrayal, and comment below where you're watching from. Just 12 hours earlier, Kemi had been the picture of success, a 28-year-old pharmacist living in a sprawling Lekki home with her husband of 6 years, Tund Adebayo, a prominent real estate developer. Their marriage had seemed perfect to everyone in their Lagos social circle. 3 beautiful children, 2 luxury cars, and a lifestyle that made other couples envious. But perfection had crumbled the moment Kemi walked into their bedroom that afternoon and found Tund with his business partner's wife, Folake Okafor, the woman who had been her closest friend for 4 years, the woman who had held Kemi's hand during childbirth, the woman who had helped plan their anniversary party just 2 months ago. "Kemi, wait," Tund had shouted as she backed out of the room, her world tilting. "It's not what you think." But it was exactly what she thought. The scattered clothes, the guilty faces, the way Folake couldn't meet her eyes. It painted a picture clearer than any confession. The confrontation that followed had been vicious. Tund, caught between shame and defiance, had lashed out with words that cut deeper than any physical blow. "You think you're so perfect, don't you?" he had snarled, his handsome face twisted with rage. "Always judging, always controlling. Do you know what it's like being married to someone who makes you feel small every day?" Kemi had stared at this stranger wearing her husband's face. "I made you feel small? I supported your business when no one else believed in you. I gave up my career plans to raise our children. Our children." Tund's laugh was bitter and cold. "Kemi, those twins, they're not even mine." The words hit her like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, her mind reeling. "What are you talking about? Did you think I wouldn't find out about Dr. Adewale? About your little affair during our rough patch 2 years ago?" Tund's voice was venomous now. "Those babies have his eyes, his nose. I've been raising another man's children while you played the perfect wife." But Kemi knew the truth. Yes, she had been close to Dr. Adewale during their marriage problems, but it had never gone beyond emotional support. The twins were Tund's, she was certain. But in his guilt and rage, her husband had constructed a lie to justify his betrayal. "They're your children, Tund. You know they are. You're creating this story because you can't face what you've done. Prove it." His eyes were cold, calculating. "Take a DNA test. Until then, don't expect me to support children that aren't mine." The cruelty in his voice chilled her. This was the man who had cried when the twins were born, who had held them for hours, who had insisted on naming them Taiwo and Kahind after his grandfather and grandmother. That evening, things had escalated beyond emotional manipulation into something far more sinister. When Kemi refused to leave the house without a proper discussion about custody and finances, Tund had made a phone call. Within an hour, 3 men had arrived, his business associates. She recognized 2 of them. "Kemi, you have 2 choices," Tund had said, his voice eerily calm. "Leave quietly with just your personal belongings, or we'll make this difficult for everyone. This is my home too. Those are your children. Not according to the DNA test I'm going to demand in court. And by the time legal proceedings are done, you'll have nothing left to fight with." The threat was clear. Tund had money, connections, and now a narrative that would destroy her reputation. In Nigerian society, a woman accused of infidelity faced social death, regardless of the truth. But Kemi had underestimated how far her husband would go. At midnight, when she was packing her children's clothes in the nursery, the lights went out. Before she could react, hands grabbed her. A cloth covered her nose and mouth, and the world went dark. She woke up in the forest, her children crying beside her on the cold ground. Tund stood over them, his face a mask of cold determination. You want to play games about paternity? He said quietly. Fine. Let's see how much Dr. Adewale cares about his alleged children when they're found dead in the forest. The police will think it was a kidnapping gone wrong. Tragic accident. Poor Dr. Adewale will be devastated to lose the woman he was secretly involved with, and the children he never knew were his. The chilling calculation in his plan made Kemi's blood run cold. Tund wasn't just abandoning them. He was staging their murders to frame another man and remove all evidence of his own crimes. You're insane, she whispered. I'm practical. Dead children can't need DNA tests. Now, as his car disappeared into the night, Kemi held her babies closer and tried to think. The forest was dense, full of dangerous wildlife, and they were miles from the nearest village. Her phone had no signal. Funmi was already shivering in the cold night air, and the twins needed feeding. But as despair threatened to overwhelm her, she heard something that made her heart leap, the sound of another car engine, coming closer. Headlights cut through the darkness, and a battered pickup truck emerged from the trees. Behind the wheel was a young man she'd never seen before, his face etched with concern as he took in the scene. Jesus Christ, he breathed, jumping out of the truck. Ma'am, what happened? Are you hurt? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think this stranger's motives are? Comment below. The young man approaching through the forest darkness couldn't have been more than 25, with kind eyes that reminded Kemi of her younger brother. His clothes were simple jeans and a faded t-shirt, but his concern was genuine as he knelt beside her and the children. My name is Emeka Okafor, he said gently, his Igbo accent soft in the night air. I was driving back from my security job when I heard the screaming. What are you doing out here with these babies? Kemi's first instinct was caution. In her current state, abandoned by her husband with a story that sounded impossible. Who would believe her? But looking into Emeka's worried face, desperation overrode prudence. My husband, he brought us here and left us, she managed, her voice breaking. He wants us dead. Emeka's expression darkened. Left you here to die? With children. He shook his head in disgust. What kind of man does such a thing? The kind who's sleeping with my best friend and wants to start over without complications, Kemi said bitterly. Without hesitation, Emeka scooped up little Funmi, who had stopped crying and was staring at him with curious eyes. Come on, let's get you somewhere safe. My grandmother's house is just 20 minutes from here. She'll know what to do. As they drove through the winding forest roads, Kemi found herself studying her rescuer. There was something familiar about his surname, Okafor. Where had she heard that before? Emeka, she said finally. Did you say your last name was Okafor? He nodded, keeping his eyes on the dark road. Yes, ma'am. Why? A chill ran down her spine. Is Folake Okafor your relative? Emeka's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She's my cousin, my father's brother's daughter. Why do you ask? The irony was almost too much to bear. The man saving her life was related to the woman who had destroyed her marriage. But as she looked at his profile, the strong jaw, the honest eyes, she realized this might not be coincidence at all. Folake is the woman my husband was with when I found them together, she said quietly. The truck swerved slightly as Emeka processed this information. Folake was with a married man? But she's married to Uncle Chike. They have children. I know. I was friends with her. I trusted her. Emeka was quiet for a long moment, then said something that surprised her. I'm sorry this happened to you. But I'm not sorry I found you tonight. Folake, she's made many bad choices lately. Uncle Chike has been worried sick. They drove in silence until they reached a modest compound on the outskirts of a small village. The house was traditional but well-maintained, with a wide veranda where an elderly woman sat waiting despite the late hour. Mama Neka, Emeka called out as they pulled up. I need your help. The old woman took one look at Kemi and the children and immediately went into action. Within minutes, the babies were fed, Funmi was asleep on a soft mat, and Kemi found herself sitting across from the wisest woman she'd ever met. Tell me everything, my child, Mama Neka said, her voice gentle but commanding. Leave out nothing. So Kemi did. She told them about the perfect marriage that was a lie, the betrayal that shattered her world, and the husband who had tried to kill her and her children rather than face the consequences of his actions. When she finished, Mama Neka sat back and studied her with sharp eyes. This Tund, he is from a wealthy family? Yes. His father owns construction companies across Lagos State. And he threatened to destroy you in court. Kemi nodded. He has money, lawyers, connections. He said he'd claim the twins weren't his and drag me through legal proceedings until I had nothing left. Emeka, who had been listening intently, spoke up. But if the children are his, a DNA test would prove it, wouldn't it? Of course. But he knows that by the time truth comes out, the damage to my reputation would be done. In our society, a woman accused of adultery is guilty until proven innocent. Even if I won in court, I'd lose in public opinion. Mama Neka nodded knowingly. Men like your husband depend on shame to control women. They believe we will accept any humiliation rather than face public disgrace. So what can I do? He has all the power, all the money, all the connections. The old woman smiled, and there was something almost predatory in it. Child, you are thinking like a victim. But tonight, you survived something that should have killed you. That makes you a warrior. I don't feel like a warrior. I feel like a fool who trusted the wrong people. The biggest mistake people make, Emeka said quietly, is thinking that good people can't fight dirty when they have to. Kemi looked at him sharply. There was something in his tone, a hardness that hadn't been there before. What do you mean? I mean that your husband made one crucial error tonight. He assumed you would die in that forest. He probably went home, disposed of any evidence, and is already preparing his story about how his wife and children disappeared. Maybe he'll even file a missing persons report tomorrow, play the grieving husband. The cold calculation in Emeka's voice reminded her suddenly of Tund. But where her husband's planning had been cruel and selfish, this young man seemed to be thinking several steps ahead toward justice. But since you're alive, he continued, you have something he doesn't know you have. You have the truth. And you have witnesses to what he tried to do. What witnesses? It was just me and the children in that forest. Mama Neka stood up slowly, her old joints creaking. Child, do you think my grandson drives through that forest at 2 in the morning for no reason? Kemi looked between them, confused. I don't understand. Tell her, Emeka, the old woman said. Her rescuer took a deep breath. I work security for a logging company. But not the kind of security you might think. My job is to catch illegal loggers, poachers, people who dump things in the forest they shouldn't. The implications hit her slowly. You were following someone? I was following a Mercedes with Lagos plates that had no business being in that part of the forest at that time of night. I have dash cam footage of the entire thing. Kemi's heart began to race. You have proof. I have proof of your husband bringing you and the children into the forest. I have audio of him abandoning you there. And I have video of him driving away while children were screaming. For the first time since the nightmare began, Kemi felt a spark of hope. But Mama Neka's next words reminded her that survival was only the first step. The question now, my child, is what you plan to do with this gift you've been given. Your husband tried to kill you tonight. He will try again when he realizes his plan failed. The weight of it settled on her shoulders. Tund would indeed try again. And next time, he would be more careful. So what do I do? Emeka and his grandmother exchanged a look that spoke of long conversations and shared understanding. You do what he would never expect, Mama Neka said simply. You disappear. Don't forget to like and subscribe. What do you think Kemi should do? Fight back or stay hidden? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The plan Mama Neka outlined was both simple and brilliant. For the next few days, Kemi would remain dead to the world while they gathered intelligence on Tund's next moves. Meanwhile, Emeka would use his connections in the security business to build an airtight case against her husband. But first, the old woman said, we need to know exactly what story he's telling. By dawn, Emeka was already in Lagos, dressed in his security uniform and positioned outside Tund's office building. The plan was to observe and listen, nothing more. But what he discovered was worse than any of them had imagined. Tund had indeed filed a missing persons report, but with a twisted narrative that made Kemi look unstable and dangerous. According to his statement to police, his wife had been suffering from postpartum depression and had become increasingly erratic and violent toward the children. She kept saying the babies weren't mine, Tund told the detective, his performance worthy of an award. I think she was planning to hurt them and then herself. When I came home last night, she was gone with all 3 children. I'm terrified of what she might do. The detective, a middle-aged man who clearly sympathized with Tund's apparent anguish, assured him that they would do everything possible to find his family before tragedy struck. But Emeka's real shock came when he followed Tund to a meeting with his lawyer later that morning. Hidden in the office building's service corridor, he recorded every word through the thin walls. The missing persons report is just the beginning, Tund was saying. I need you to prepare divorce papers citing abandonment and mental instability. I also want to explore having her declared legally incompetent. That's a serious step, Tund, the lawyer replied. You'd need medical evidence of her mental state. I can get that. Dr. Bello owes me favors, and he's willing to state that Kemi has been his patient for depression and anxiety. He'll say she's been showing signs of psychotic behavior. Emeka's blood ran cold. Not only was Tund destroying his wife's reputation, but he was also corrupting medical professionals to build false evidence against her. And the children, the lawyer asked. Once she's declared incompetent or arrested for endangering them, I'll file for full custody. Then I can quietly arrange DNA tests to prove the twins aren't mine. The court will award them to their real father or put them in foster care. But what if the DNA tests show you are the father? Tund's laugh was chilling. That won't be a problem. I know people who can ensure the results say whatever I need them to say. Back in the village, Kemi listened to Emeka's recording with growing horror and rage. Every word confirmed her worst fears about her husband's character, but hearing the depth of his manipulation still shocked her. He's not just trying to get rid of me, she said, her voice shaking. He's trying to destroy any possibility that I could ever be believed by anyone. Which is exactly why we have to be smarter than him, Mama Neka replied calmly. He's counting on no one questioning his story, because he's a respected businessman and you're just a missing woman who can't defend herself. But I am just a missing woman who can't defend herself. How do I fight someone with his resources? Emeka sat forward, his expression intense. By using those resources against him. Your husband has just made several serious mistakes. He's committed conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. But more importantly, he's involved other people in his crimes. What do you mean? This Dr. Bello, who's willing to lie about your mental state, that's medical fraud and perjury. The people he knows who can fake DNA results, that's evidence tampering. Every person he involves becomes a potential weakness in his story. Mama Neka nodded approvingly. My grandson learns quickly. Your husband thinks his money and connections make him untouchable. But corrupt people are always afraid of being exposed. They can be turned. Over the next 2 days, while Tund played the grieving husband for the media and police, they built their counter-strategy. Emeka used his security network to investigate Dr. Bello and discovered the doctor had been involved in several questionable practices, including selling medical certificates to people who wanted to avoid military service. Meanwhile, Mama Neka reached out to her own network, the domestic workers, drivers, and small business owners who served Lagos's elite families. These invisible people saw everything and heard everything, and many of them had reasons to dislike men like Tund Adebayo. The breakthrough came on the 3rd day, when Emeka's contact at the phone company provided them with Tund's call records from the night of the forest incident. Not only did the records show that Tund had made several calls before and after abandoning his family, but one of those calls had been to Folake Okafor. He called her at 11:47 p.m., Emeka reported, showing them the printout. The call lasted 14 minutes. Then he called her again at 2:33 a.m. for 6 minutes. Kemi felt sick. He was coordinating with her. She knew what he was planning. Which means she's an accessory to attempted murder, Emeka said grimly. And unlike your husband, my cousin doesn't have the resources to protect herself if this goes public. Mama Neka smiled her predatory smile again. It's time to make our first move, child. But not the move they're expecting. That evening, Folake Okafor received a phone call from a number she didn't recognize. When she answered, a woman's voice, disguised but somehow familiar, spoke just 4 words that made her blood run cold. I know what happened. The line went dead, leaving Folake staring at her phone in terror. Because she did know what had happened. She knew about the plan to abandon Kemi and the children in the forest. She knew about the fake medical records being prepared. She knew about the DNA fraud being arranged. And now someone else knew too. As Folake sat in her comfortable Lagos home, her hands shaking as she tried to call Tund, she had no idea that 300 kilometers away, the woman whose life she had helped destroy was very much alive and planning her revenge. The game was about to begin, and this time, Kemi held all the cards. If you're enjoying this story of betrayal and revenge, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. Comment below. Do you think Folake will crack under pressure? What would you do in Kemi's situation? Folake's panic was exactly what Kemi had hoped for. Within an hour of the mysterious phone call, Emeka's surveillance equipment picked up frantic conversations as Folake called Tund repeatedly, each call more desperate than the last. She knows, Tund. Someone knows what we did. Calm down. You're being paranoid. Kemi is dead. No one else was there. Then who called me? They said, I know what happened, and hung up. That's not random. Through the recordings, Kemi could hear her husband's confidence beginning to crack. Good. Let him feel the fear she had felt in that forest. But Mama Neka had bigger plans than just psychological warfare. Fear makes people sloppy, the old woman explained as they sat around her kitchen table, planning their next move. Your husband and his lover are about to start making mistakes. We just need to give them opportunities. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Dr. Bello, the physician Tund was bribing to provide false medical records, had agreed to meet him the next evening at an exclusive restaurant in Victoria Island. Emeka had learned about the meeting through a contact who worked valet parking at high-end establishments. This is our chance to get evidence of the medical fraud, Emeka explained. But we need to be careful. If they spot surveillance equipment, they'll know someone is watching. Kemi had been thinking about this problem for hours when the solution came to her. I don't need surveillance equipment. I need to be there myself. Both Emeka and his grandmother stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. Absolutely not, Emeka said immediately. If Tund sees you, he'll know his plan failed. He could get violent, or worse, he could disappear, and we'd lose our chance to expose him. He won't see me, because he won't be looking for me. As far as he knows, I'm dead in that forest. People don't look for ghosts. Mama Neka studied her with calculating eyes. What are you thinking, child? I'm thinking that I've been hiding long enough. It's time to take some risks. The plan they developed was audacious and dangerous. Kemi would disguise herself and position herself close enough to Tund's table to record his conversation with Dr. Bello. Meanwhile, Emeka would be outside with backup recording equipment in case anything went wrong. The next evening, Kemi stood in front of a mirror in Mama Neka's bedroom, barely recognizing herself. Her hair was covered by a stylish head wrap, dark glasses hid half her face, and she wore clothes borrowed from the old woman's collection, a traditional wrapper and blouse that changed her entire silhouette. You look like a different person, Emeka admitted grudgingly. He still didn't like the plan, but he had to admit it was their best chance. That's the idea. Tund has never paid attention to traditional dress. To him, I'll just be another market woman who somehow wandered into an expensive restaurant. The restaurant was everything Kemi remembered about Lagos's elite dining scene, expensive, pretentious, and designed to make ordinary people feel unwelcome. Perfect cover for her disguise. She positioned herself at a table for 2, ordered the cheapest item on the menu, and waited. Her heart nearly stopped when Tund walked in, looking every inch the successful businessman in his tailored suit. He was accompanied by a man she recognized as Dr. Bello from medical conferences she had attended as a pharmacist. They sat 2 tables away from her, close enough for the recording device hidden in her purse to pick up their conversation. "I need the medical records to show a history of postpartum psychosis," Tun said without preamble. "Violent episodes, threats to harm the children, the whole picture." Dr. Bello looked uncomfortable. "Tund, this is serious fraud we're talking about. If I'm caught falsifying medical records, I could lose my license." "You won't be caught, and the payment will be worth the risk." Tun slid an envelope across the table. 50,000 naira now, 50,000 when the records are submitted to the court. Kemi's hands clenched in her lap. 100,000 naira to destroy her reputation and take her children away. "What about the psychiatrist who's supposed to have treated her?" Dr. Bello asked. "Dr. Adebayo, no relation, despite the name, has already agreed to provide supporting documentation. He owes me money from a business deal, so he's motivated to cooperate." The casual way her husband discussed corrupting medical professionals made Kemi feel sick. But she kept recording, knowing every word was evidence that could destroy him. "And if she's found alive?" Dr. Bello pressed. Tun's expression darkened. "She won't be. But if by some miracle she survives and tries to fight the medical evidence, who's going to believe a woman who abandoned her children in the forest? Especially when 2 respected doctors testify about her mental state." "The children, are you sure about the paternity issue?" "I'm sure they're not mine. But even if they were, I don't want them. Folake and I are planning to start fresh, maybe move to Abuja, where no one knows our history." Each word was like a knife in Kemi's heart, but she forced herself to remain calm and keep recording. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Tund outlining his plans to liquidate assets quietly and transfer money to accounts Kemi couldn't access. He had thought of everything, except the possibility that his victim might survive to hear his confessions. As the 2 men prepared to leave, Tund's phone rang. Kemi watched his face change as he listened to the caller. "What do you mean there's no trace of them in the forest?" "I left them there myself." His voice rose slightly, causing other diners to glance in his direction. He stepped outside to continue the call, leaving Dr. Bello alone at the table. This was Kemi's chance for something even more valuable than recordings. She stood up, walked calmly to the bathroom, and then circled back through the restaurant service area. Years of accompanying Tund to business dinners had taught her the layout of Lagos's upscale establishments. Approaching Dr. Bello from behind, she leaned down and spoke quietly in his ear. "Doctor, the envelope in your jacket contains evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. If you walk away now and forget this conversation ever happened, no one needs to know you were here. But if you follow through on this arrangement, I promise you that your medical license will be the least of your worries." Dr. Bello spun around, but Kemi was already walking away, her head wrap and glasses still perfectly concealing her identity. By the time Tund returned from his phone call, Dr. Bello was gone, and the envelope of money was sitting abandoned on the table. Tund stared at it in confusion and growing alarm. First, his wife's body had mysteriously disappeared from the forest. Now, his carefully recruited accomplice had fled without explanation. Someone was definitely hunting him. He just didn't know it was his supposedly dead wife. As Kemi made her way back to the village that night, she carried with her not just recordings that could destroy her husband's credibility, but also the satisfaction of seeing real fear in his eyes for the first time. The hunter was becoming the hunted, and Tund was about to discover that his greatest mistake hadn't been abandoning his family in the forest. His greatest mistake had been underestimating his wife's will to survive. What do you think Kemi should do next? Should she reveal herself or keep playing the long game? Drop your predictions in the comments and don't forget to hit that like button. The disappearance of Dr. Bello sent Tund into a paranoid spiral that was beautiful to watch. Emeka surveillance showed him making increasingly frantic phone calls, changing meeting locations at the last minute, and looking over his shoulder constantly. But it was Folake who cracked first. 3 days after the restaurant incident, she showed up at Mama Neka's compound at dawn, driving a dusty Honda that had seen better days. She sat in the car for a full 10 minutes before finally getting out and walking to the veranda, where the old woman was already waiting with her morning tea. Mama Neka, Folake said, her voice shaking. I need to speak with your grandson. It's about Kemi Adebayo. The old woman studied her with sharp eyes. My grandson is not here. But perhaps you can tell me what you know about this woman you mention. Folake collapsed into a chair, her composure finally breaking. She's alive, isn't she? Kemi is alive, and she's coming for us. Why would you think such a thing? Mama Neka asked mildly. Because someone has been calling me. Someone who knows about the forest. Someone who knows what Tun did. Folake's hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. Listen to this. The voicemail that played was brief but chilling. Your husband doesn't know about your meetings with Tun yet, does he, Folake? How long do you think it will be before he finds out about the affair and your role in attempted murder? Mama Neka listened without expression. You seem very frightened, child. Of course I'm frightened. If Chike finds out about the affair, he'll divorce me and take the children. If the police find out about the forest, I'll go to prison. And if Tun finds out that I'm talking to anyone, he might. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Might what? Might decide that I know too much to be allowed to live. The confession hung in the air between them. Folake had just admitted that she believed Tund was capable of murder, and that she was afraid of becoming his next victim. Mama Neka set down her teacup. It sounds like you need protection, child. But protection comes at a price. What kind of price? The truth. All of it. Over the next hour, Folake spilled everything. The affair with Tund had started 6 months ago during a business trip to Abuja. What began as mutual consolation over their respective marital problems had escalated into an obsession that consumed both of them. Tund said Kemi was controlling and cold, Folake explained, tears streaming down her face. He made it sound like she was keeping him prisoner in his own marriage. I felt sorry for him. And you believed him? Folake's laugh was bitter. I wanted to believe him. My own marriage was falling apart. Chike works constantly, we barely speak, and I felt invisible in my own home. Tund made me feel desired again. When did you learn about his plan to hurt his family? The night before it happened. He called me, completely panicked about being caught. He said Kemi would destroy both of us if she exposed the affair. He needed to discredit her before she could go public. Mama Neka leaned forward. And you agreed to help him? I didn't know he was planning to kill them. He said he was just going to scare her, maybe leave her in the forest for a few hours so she'd understand how serious he was about keeping quiet. Folake's voice cracked. When he told me later that he'd actually abandoned her and the children there, I was horrified. But not horrified enough to call the police. He said it was too late. If I reported him, I'd be an accessory to attempted murder. He convinced me that our only choice was to stick together and hope no one found out. From her hiding place inside the house, Kemi listened to this confession with a mixture of rage and satisfaction. Folake's guilt was obvious, but so was her terror of Tund. The other woman was ready to turn against him to save herself. Mama Neka seemed to sense this too. What would you be willing to do to protect yourself and your children, Folake? Anything. I'll do anything to make this right. Even testify against Tund. Folake hesitated for only a moment. If it means my children stay safe, yes. That afternoon, while Folake waited nervously in the village, Emeka arranged for her to speak with a lawyer who specialized in criminal cases. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Dunny Ogundipe, listened to Folake's story and immediately understood the implications. You're admitting to conspiracy in attempted murder, she told Folake bluntly. But you're also a potential key witness against the primary perpetrator. If you're willing to cooperate fully, I might be able to negotiate immunity in exchange for your testimony. What does full cooperation mean? It means wearing a wire when you meet with Tund. It means testifying about everything you know regarding his plan to kill his wife and children. And it means providing any evidence you have of his other crimes. Folake paled. If he finds out I'm working with the police, he'll kill me. If you don't work with us, Emeka said quietly, and Kemi decides to go public with what she knows, you'll go to prison. At least this way, you have a chance to protect yourself and your family. The decision was made. Within hours, Folake was fitted with recording equipment and given instructions for re-establishing contact with Tund. Her job was to arrange a meeting and get him to confess on tape. But when she called him that evening, Tund's paranoia had reached new levels. "I can't meet you anywhere public," he said, his voice tight with stress. "Someone is watching me. Someone knows about the forest." "What are you talking about?" "Dr. Bello ran away from our meeting. Just disappeared, left the money on the table. Then, yesterday, someone broke into my office. Nothing was stolen, but files were moved around. Someone is playing games with me." Folake's heart pounded. "Maybe we should just confess, Tund. Turn ourselves in before this gets worse." "Are you insane?" His voice turned vicious. "If we confess, we both go to prison. No, we stick to the plan. Kemi and the children are dead. No one can prove otherwise." "But what if they're not dead? What if someone found them?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Folake wondered if he'd hung up. "If they're alive," Tund finally said, his voice cold as ice, "then we have to finish what we started." The recording captured every word, and when Lawyer Ogundipe heard it, her expression grew grim. "He just threatened to commit murder again, on tape," she told the group assembled in Mama Neka's parlor. "This is enough to arrest him immediately." But Kemi shook her head. "Not yet. I want more than just attempted murder charges. I want him destroyed completely, the way he tried to destroy me." "What do you have in mind?" Emeka asked. "I want his business partners to know what kind of man they're dealing with. I want his family to see who he really is. I want everyone in Lagos society to understand that Tund Adebayo is a man who would kill his own children rather than face the consequences of his actions." Mama Neka smiled approvingly. "Now you're thinking like a warrior." The plan they hatched was ambitious and required precise timing. Using Folake's inside knowledge of Tund's business operations, they discovered that he was scheduled to attend a major real estate investors' meeting the following week. All of Lagos's construction and development elite would be there, including several potential business partners Tund desperately needed. The meeting would also be attended by journalists from the business press, since several major development projects were being announced. "This is where we end it," Kemi decided, "in front of everyone who matters to him professionally and socially." But first, they needed to force Tund into making one final, irreversible mistake. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The tension is building. What do you think Kemi's master plan will be? Comment your predictions below. The final trap was set in motion when Folake sent Tund a message that would push his paranoia over the edge. "I think Kemi is alive. Meet me at the construction site tomorrow night. We need to talk." The construction site Folake referenced was one of Tund's own projects, a half-finished apartment complex in Ikeja that had been abandoned due to funding issues. It was isolated, unguarded, and the perfect place for a desperate man to make desperate decisions. Emeka positioned surveillance equipment around the site hours before the meeting, while Kemi and Lawyer Ogundipe waited in a van with police backup just close enough to intervene if needed. When Tund arrived that night, his behavior was erratic and violent in ways that even Kemi hadn't expected. The man who had once been her charming, successful husband was now a cornered animal, dangerous and unpredictable. "Tell me exactly what you know," he demanded as soon as Folake approached. "Who has been calling you? Who broke into my office?" "I don't know," Folake said, her voice shaking despite the wire she wore. "But Tund, I think we need to consider that Kemi might have survived." His reaction was explosive. "Then we find her and finish the job. I'm not going to prison because you're too weak to see this through." "Finish the job? You mean kill her?" "I mean eliminate the threat to our future. You and I belong together, Folake. But we can't be together if she's alive to destroy us." The recording equipment captured every word as Tund outlined his plan to track down his wife and children and solve the problem permanently. But the most chilling moment came when Folake asked what would happen if the children were found alive. "Children don't make reliable witnesses," Tund said coldly. "Tragic accidents happen all the time." Even Folake, who had been complicit in his earlier crimes, looked horrified at this casual discussion of murdering children. "Tund, listen to yourself. These are your children we're talking about. They're not my children. How many times do I have to tell you that? But what if the DNA tests prove they are? Then I'll make sure the tests are wrong. From the van, Kemi listened to her husband calmly discuss murdering their children and felt something cold and final settle in her heart. This wasn't the man she had married. This wasn't even the man who had betrayed her. This was a monster who would kill innocent babies to protect his reputation. The meeting continued for another hour, with Tund becoming increasingly agitated and making more explicit threats. When he finally left, they had recorded enough evidence to ensure he would spend the rest of his life in prison. But Kemi wanted more than justice. She wanted the complete destruction of everything Tund valued. 3 days later, the Lagos Real Estate Investors Association held its quarterly meeting at the Intercontinental Hotel. The ballroom was filled with the city's construction elite, government officials, and business journalists. Tund, despite his recent paranoia, couldn't afford to miss such an important networking opportunity. He arrived looking every inch the successful businessman, his expensive suit and confident smile masking the desperation beneath. Several potential partners approached him about new projects, and for a few hours, he managed to convince himself that his troubles were behind him. The trap was sprung during the evening's main presentation, when the association's president announced a special segment on ethics in development, featuring a surprise guest speaker who had important information about fraud in the construction industry. Tund watched with growing unease as the lights dimmed and a screen descended from the ceiling. When audio began playing over the room's sound system, his blood turned to ice. I need the medical records to show a history of postpartum psychosis, violent episodes, threats to harm the children, the whole picture. It was his own voice, crystal clear, discussing the bribery of Dr. Bello. The entire room heard him casually planning to falsify medical records to steal custody of his children. But that was only the beginning. The presentation continued with audio from his meeting with Folake at the construction site, where his voice filled the ballroom as he discussed murdering his wife and children. Children don't make reliable witnesses. Tragic accidents happen all the time. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Several people stood up and walked out in disgust. Others began talking angrily among themselves. Government officials in attendance looked stricken. Being associated with such a scandal could destroy their careers. Tund tried to stand, tried to deny what everyone was hearing, but his voice was drowned out by the continuing audio evidence of his crimes. The final blow came when the screen lit up with video footage from Emeka's dashcam, showing Tund's Mercedes entering the forest with passengers and leaving empty while children's screams echoed in the background. By the time the presentation ended, Tund Adebayo's reputation was completely destroyed. Business partners were publicly disavowing any connection to him. Government contracts were being canceled. His carefully constructed life was collapsing in real time. But the humiliation wasn't over. As police officers entered the ballroom to arrest him, the association president made one final announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the woman who provided this evidence, Mrs. Kemi Adebayo, who survived her husband's attempt to murder her and her 3 children." Kemi stepped out from behind the presentation screen, very much alive, very much vindicated, and absolutely determined to see justice done. The room erupted in gasps and applause as people realized they were witnessing not just the downfall of a criminal, but the triumph of a woman who had refused to become a victim. Tund's last words before the police handcuffed him were perhaps the most honest thing he'd said in months. "I should have made sure you were dead." "Yes," Kemi replied calmly. "You should have." What an incredible moment of justice. If you're loving this story of survival and revenge, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. What do you think should happen to Tund next? Let me know in the comments. The arrest of Tund Adebayo became front-page news across Nigeria within hours. Social media exploded with outrage over the attempted murder of a mother and her children, and support for Kemi's courage in exposing her husband's crimes. But while the public celebrated her vindication, Kemi faced a new set of challenges that threatened to overwhelm her. The legal proceedings were complex and exhausting. Tund's family, led by his powerful father Chief Adebayo, hired the most expensive lawyers in Lagos to challenge every piece of evidence. They claimed the recordings were fabricated, the videos were doctored, and that Kemi herself had orchestrated the entire scandal to steal her husband's wealth. She's a manipulative woman who destroyed our son's life out of jealousy, Chief Adebayo told reporters outside the courthouse. My son is guilty of nothing more than trying to protect himself from a vindictive wife. The media attention was intense and often hostile. While many supported Kemi, others questioned her motives and painted her as a gold digger who had orchestrated an elaborate revenge scheme. The stress was taking its toll on her children, especially 3-year-old Funmi, who had begun having nightmares. But the worst challenge came from an unexpected source, her own extended family. Kemi's father, Pastor David Olusala, had built his reputation on traditional family values and the sanctity of marriage. Her very public divorce and the scandal surrounding it embarrassed him deeply. You should have handled this privately, he told her during a tense family meeting at his Lagos home. Airing your marital problems in public brings shame on our entire family name. He tried to kill me and the children, Papa. Should I have kept quiet about that too? You could have reported it to the police without this circus. Now our family name is associated with scandal and divorce. How does that help anyone? Kemi's mother was more supportive, but equally worried. We just want you to think about the children's future. This publicity will follow them their entire lives. The pressure from her family was almost as painful as her husband's betrayal. These were the people who should have been celebrating her survival and courage, but instead they were asking her to minimize her experience to protect their reputation. Meanwhile, Tun's legal team was making aggressive moves to turn public opinion against her. They leaked carefully edited portions of old text messages between Kemi and Dr. Adewale, trying to build a case that she had indeed been unfaithful during her marriage. The messages, taken out of context, could be interpreted as romantic even though they were actually about professional medical consultations. But in the court of public opinion, perception mattered more than truth. Mrs. Adebayo's claim that she was a faithful wife is contradicted by her own messages, Tun's lawyer announced to the press. Our client may have made mistakes, but he was responding to years of emotional abuse and infidelity. The strategy was working. Some media outlets began running stories questioning Kemi's version of events. Online comment sections filled with speculation about her motives and character. The stress was overwhelming, and there were moments when Kemi wondered if her father was right, if she should have handled everything quietly and privately. Those doubts evaporated the day she received a visit from an unexpected ally. Dr. Chike Okafor, Folake's husband, arrived at Mama Nneka's compound without warning. The pediatric surgeon looked haggard and older than his 45 years, but his purpose was clear. I want to testify for you, he said, without preamble. My wife told me everything about her involvement with your husband. I want the court to hear what this affair did to both our families. Kemi studied him carefully. She had known Chike professionally for years. He had a reputation as one of Lagos's most respected pediatricians and a devoted family man. Why would you want to put yourself through that? Testifying will make your private pain public. Because what your husband did to you and those children is unforgivable, he replied, his voice heavy with emotion. Folake made terrible choices, but she never would have been involved in attempted murder if he hadn't manipulated her emotions and convinced her they had no choice. Are you staying with her? Chike was quiet for a long moment. We're in counseling. I don't know if our marriage can survive this, but I know our children deserve to see their father stand up for what's right. His testimony would be powerful because it came from someone with no ulterior motive, a man whose own life had been destroyed by the scandal, but who was still willing to support the truth. But even more importantly, Dr. Chike's decision to testify encouraged other witnesses to come forward. Dr. Bello, the physician Tund had tried to bribe, agreed to testify about the attempted medical fraud. Several of Tund's employees came forward with evidence of his increasingly erratic and threatening behavior in the weeks leading up to the forest incident. Most surprisingly, Chief Adebayo's driver of 20 years approached Kemi's legal team with information that could be devastating to Tund's defense. I drove Master Tund many times in recent months, the elderly man explained. I heard him make phone calls where he said terrible things about his wife and children. I heard him planning with that Folake woman. Why are you coming forward now? Lawyer Ogundipe asked. Because I have granddaughters the same age as those babies, he said simply. No man should try to kill children, no matter what quarrel he has with their mother. As more witnesses emerged and more evidence surfaced, the tide of public opinion began to shift back in Kemi's favor. The attempts to portray her as a vindictive schemer were undermined by the sheer volume of evidence showing Tund's calculated cruelty. But the most powerful moment came when the DNA results were finally processed by an independent laboratory. The tests confirmed what Kemi had always known. The twins were indeed Tund's biological children. When the results were made public, even Tund's most vocal supporters fell silent. The man who had tried to kill children because he claimed they weren't his had been proven wrong by science. Standing outside the courthouse after the DNA results were announced, Kemi felt a sense of vindication that went beyond legal victory. My husband tried to destroy me to avoid taking responsibility for his actions, she told the gathered reporters. But the truth has a way of surviving, even when powerful people try to bury it. As she spoke, she held baby Taiwo in her arms, while Kahin slept in his carrier, and Funmi played quietly nearby. The 3 children Tund had been willing to murder were healthy, happy, and very much alive. The final phase of the trial was about to begin, and Kemi was ready to face whatever came next. But she had no idea that her husband's desperation would lead him to make one last, terrifying gamble to escape justice. The climax is approaching. What do you think Tund will try next? Drop your predictions in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for the thrilling conclusion. The courtroom was packed on the day of Tund's testimony. Media representatives, family members from both sides, and curious onlookers filled every available seat. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Would Tund finally confess to his crimes, or would he continue his desperate attempts to shift blame to his wife? What no one expected was for the defendant's chair to be empty when court convened. Your Honor, announced Chief Prosecutor Adebayo, no relation to the defendant, we have just learned that Mr. Tund Adebayo failed to report to his bail supervisor this morning. A warrant has been issued for his arrest. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Tund had jumped bail and disappeared, vanishing sometime during the night from the family compound where he had been staying under his father's supervision. Chief Adebayo stood up in the gallery, his face red with rage and embarrassment. My son is not a flight risk. This is obviously a misunderstanding. But as police questioned the family, a disturbing picture emerged. Tund had been increasingly agitated in recent days, talking obsessively about finishing what he started, and muttering about people who couldn't be allowed to testify against him. The most chilling revelation came from a housemaid who had overheard Tund making phone calls in the middle of the night. He was asking someone about getting a gun, she told police nervously. He said he needed to solve the problem permanently before the trial continued. Kemi felt ice in her veins when she heard this. Her husband wasn't just running from justice. He was planning to eliminate the witnesses against him, starting with her. Within hours, police protection was arranged for Kemi, her children, and the key witnesses in the case. But Tund had already demonstrated his willingness to use violence, and now he had nothing left to lose. The manhunt for Tund Adebayo became front-page news across Nigeria. Police roadblocks were set up at state borders, airports were monitored, and his photograph was circulated to law enforcement agencies across West Africa. But Tund wasn't trying to flee the country. He was hiding much closer to home, planning his final desperate gambit. The breakthrough came when Emeka's security contacts reported suspicious activity at one of Tund's abandoned construction sites, the same location where he had met Folake for their recorded conversation. Someone has been staying there, the security guard reported. Lights at night, car movements. But whenever we go to investigate, there's no one there. Police set up surveillance on the site, but Tund was too smart to be caught so easily. He had been using the abandoned building as a base while he planned his next move, but he wasn't staying there. His real target became clear when a school administrator called police with a disturbing report. A man matching Tunde Adebayo's description was asking questions about Funmi Adebayo, the administrator told officers. He claimed to be her father picking her up early, but our records show that her mother has full custody and that the father is not allowed contact. The school had followed proper safety protocols and refused to release Funmi, but the attempt sent chills through everyone involved in the case. Tunde was trying to kidnap his own daughter. That night, as Kemi sat in the safe house with her children, surrounded by police protection, she realized that this nightmare would never truly end as long as Tunde was free. He would keep coming for them, keep trying to eliminate the evidence of his crimes, keep escalating until someone was killed. "I have to draw him out," she told Detective Inspector Fullerin, the officer in charge of her protection. "He's not going to stop hunting us, so we need to make him come to us on our terms." "Absolutely not. You're not bait, Mrs. Adebayo. We'll find him through proper police work." But proper police work wasn't fast enough. Tunde knew Lagos better than the police did, had money hidden in accounts they couldn't trace, and had connections who might be willing to help him despite his criminal charges. The solution came from Mama Neka, whose network of domestic workers and small business owners proved more effective than official law enforcement. "Child," the old woman told Kemi during one of her visits to the safe house, "my sources tell me your husband is planning something for tomorrow night. There's going to be a gathering at his father's compound, some kind of family meeting about the scandal." "What kind of gathering?" "The kind where desperate men make desperate decisions. I think he's planning to come out of hiding, maybe to get money or help from his family." Detective Inspector Fullerin was skeptical, but agreed to increase surveillance on the Adebayo family compound. What they discovered was more disturbing than anyone had anticipated. Chief Adebayo had indeed called a family meeting, but not to plan Tunde's surrender. Intercepted phone calls revealed that the powerful patriarch was arranging to smuggle his son out of the country, with help from business associates who had connections in Benin Republic. "They're planning to move him tomorrow night," Detective Inspector Fullerin reported to his superiors. "If we don't act fast, he'll be beyond our reach." The operation to capture Tunde was planned with military precision. Police surrounded the compound, blocked all exit routes, and prepared for a potentially violent confrontation with a desperate fugitive who had already proven his willingness to kill. But when they moved in, they found something that changed everything. Tunde wasn't trying to escape at all. He was holding his own father hostage, demanding that Chief Adebayo arrange for Kemi and the children to be brought to the compound. "I want to see my wife," Tunde screamed at the police officers who had him surrounded. "I want to explain to her why this all had to happen. She destroyed my life, and I want her to understand what she's done." The man who had once been Lagos's golden boy of real estate development was now clearly having a complete mental breakdown. His expensive clothes were dirty and torn, his hair was unkempt, and his eyes had the wild look of someone who had lost touch with reality. "She made me do it," he shouted at anyone who would listen. "She forced me to choose between my reputation and my family. What kind of choice is that?" Detective Inspector Fullerin established contact with Tunde through a megaphone, trying to negotiate his surrender. "Mr. Adebayo, release your father and we can discuss this calmly. I want to see Kemi. I want to explain to her how much I loved her, how much I sacrificed for our marriage." The delusion was complete. In Tunde's fractured mind, attempted murder had become sacrifice, and abandoning his family in the forest had become an act of love. As the standoff continued into the night, it became clear that this would only end one of two ways, with Tunde's surrender or with tragedy. But the decision was about to be taken out of everyone's hands by someone no one saw coming. The tension is unbearable. How do you think this dangerous standoff will end? Comment your predictions and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens next. The standoff had been going on for 6 hours when an unexpected figure emerged from the crowd of onlookers. Folake Okafor, her face set with grim determination. "Let me talk to him," she told Detective Inspector Fullerin. "I know how his mind works. He might listen to me." The police were hesitant to involve a civilian, especially one who was herself a defendant in the case. But traditional negotiation tactics weren't working, and Tund was becoming increasingly agitated as the night wore on. Mrs. Okafor, you understand that anything you say to him will be recorded and could affect your own legal proceedings? I understand. But Chief Adebayo is an innocent man, and I'm partly responsible for his son being in this state. Against their better judgment, the police allowed Folake to approach the compound under heavy protection. Through the bullhorn, she called out to the man who had destroyed both their lives. Tund, it's me. Let Chief Adebayo go. This isn't his fault. The response was immediate and heartbreaking. Folake? Oh God, Folake, they turned you against me too, didn't they? They made you believe their lies about what happened in the forest. I was there when you planned it, Tund. I heard you talking about it. There are no lies. You don't understand. I never wanted to hurt them. I just wanted Kemi to understand how serious I was about us being together. The delusion was so complete that even Folake was shaken by it. The man she had been involved with, the man she had thought she knew, was completely disconnected from reality. Tund, you left her and the children to die. You planned to let them die of exposure or be killed by wild animals. That's not what happened. I was going to go back for them. I just wanted to scare her into agreeing to a quiet divorce. But even as he said it, recordings of his own voice were playing on police speakers. Recordings where he clearly stated his intention to make sure his wife and children never survived to testify against him. The confrontation between reality and delusion seemed to break something in Tund's mind. He released his father and sank to his knees in the compound's driveway, sobbing uncontrollably. I loved her, he kept repeating. I loved Kemi so much. Why couldn't she just understand that? Chief Adebayo, freed but shaken, stumbled toward the police line. The patriarch who had once commanded respect across Lagos looked every year of his age as he spoke to the officers. My son is very ill, he said quietly. He needs medical help, not just imprisonment. As police moved in to arrest Tund without further resistance, a car pulled up to the scene. Kemi stepped out against all police advice and walked toward the man who had tried to kill her and their children. I'm here, Tund, she said simply. He looked up at her with eyes that were both desperate and broken. Kemi, you're really alive. Yes, I'm alive. We're all alive. Funmi, Taiwo, Kahind, all of us. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know how it got so bad. For a moment, Kemi felt something that surprised her. Not forgiveness, exactly, but pity. This broken man bore little resemblance to the confident, charming person she had married 6 years ago. You tried to kill our children, Tund. I know. God help me, I know. His voice was barely audible. I told myself they weren't mine because it was the only way I could live with what I was planning. But I knew. I always knew they were mine. It was the first completely honest thing he had said in months, and perhaps the only real confession he would ever make. As police led him away, Tund looked back at Kemi one last time. I did love you, you know. In the beginning, I really did love you. I know, she replied. But love isn't supposed to turn into hatred when it's challenged. Love isn't supposed to become murder when it's inconvenient. The arrest ended the immediate physical threat, but it also marked the beginning of a different kind of challenge for Kemi. The legal proceedings would continue, but now she would have to testify against a man who was clearly suffering from a complete mental breakdown. The psychiatrist who evaluated Tund diagnosed him with acute stress disorder complicated by narcissistic personality traits that had escalated into delusional thinking. He was, they concluded, mentally ill, but still legally responsible for his actions. The diagnosis created new complications for the trial. Tund's lawyers immediately began building an insanity defense, arguing that their client had been suffering from a psychotic break and couldn't be held fully responsible for his actions. But the evidence was overwhelming, and much of it showed clear premeditation and calculation that contradicted claims of insanity. The bribery attempts, the coordination with accomplices, the elaborate cover-up. These weren't the actions of someone who had lost touch with reality. More importantly, the recordings from the construction site meeting showed Tund calmly discussing future murders, while demonstrating clear awareness that his actions were wrong and illegal. A man who knows his actions are wrong and takes steps to avoid being caught is not legally insane, Prosecutor Adebayo explained to the court. Mr. Adebayo may be mentally ill, but he knew exactly what he was doing when he tried to murder his wife and children. The trial's conclusion came 3 months later, in a courtroom packed with supporters, journalists, and family members from both sides. When the jury returned their verdict, guilty on all counts, including attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and child endangerment, Kemi felt a sense of justice that she had never thought possible. Tund was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole for 15 years. Folake received 5 years probation and community service in exchange for her testimony. Dr. Bello lost his medical license, but avoided prison time due to his cooperation with prosecutors. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came when Chief Adebayo approached Kemi outside the courthouse after sentencing. "I owe you an apology," the old man said, his voice heavy with shame. "I raised a son who was capable of trying to kill children. That failure is mine to bear." "Your son made his own choices," Kemi replied. "You can't take responsibility for decisions he made as a grown man." "Perhaps. But I can take responsibility for supporting him when I should have encouraged him to face the truth about what he had done." It was as close to justice as Kemi would ever get from Tund's family, and it was enough. As she walked away from the courthouse with her 3 children and her small group of supporters, Kemi felt something she hadn't experienced in almost a year: genuine hope for the future. The nightmare was finally over, but the real challenge was just beginning: learning how to build a new life from the ashes of the old one. Justice has been served. But how will Kemi rebuild her life after such betrayal? Don't miss the final chapter. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. 1 year after Tund's conviction, Kemi stood in the pharmacy she had opened in a busy Ikeja shopping complex, watching her children play in the small office space behind the counter. The business was thriving. Her reputation as both a pharmacist and a survivor had brought her clients from across Lagos, and for the first time in years, she felt genuinely at peace. The journey to this moment hadn't been easy. The months following the trial had brought their own challenges: media attention that wouldn't fade, family relationships that needed rebuilding, and the constant work of helping her children process their traumatic experiences. FundMe, now 4, had required months of therapy to stop having nightmares about the forest. The twins, too young to remember the events directly, were nonetheless affected by the stress and upheaval that had surrounded their early lives. But children are resilient, and with love, consistency, and professional help, all 3 were thriving. The financial settlement from her divorce had been substantial. Tund's assets had been frozen during the trial, and the court had awarded Kemi a significant portion of his wealth as compensation for the attempted murder and fraud. She had used the money wisely, investing in her pharmacy, her children's education, and a modest but comfortable home in a safe neighborhood. More importantly, she had used her experience to help other women facing domestic violence and betrayal. Her story had made her a powerful advocate, and she frequently spoke at conferences and support groups about survival, resilience, and the importance of refusing to accept abuse. On this particular afternoon, as she was closing the pharmacy, an unexpected visitor arrived: Emeka Okafor, the young man whose decision to investigate strange sounds in the forest had literally saved her life. "Mrs. Kemi," he said, his warm smile unchanged from that first night. "How are you and the children?" "We're well, Emeka." "Very well. And please call me Kemi. I think we're past formalities." He had become a regular presence in their lives over the past year, not romantic, but certainly meaningful. His kindness to her children, his steady support during the trial, and his genuine friendship had been invaluable during her recovery. "I have news," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. Folake completed her community service last week. She's moving to Abuja with her family. Kemi nodded. She had mixed feelings about Folake's fate. The other woman's betrayal had been devastating, but her cooperation during the trial had been crucial to securing Tund's conviction. How is she? Different. The experience changed her. She's in therapy, her marriage is slowly healing, and she's working with an organization that helps women recognize the signs of manipulation in relationships. Good. I hope she can find some peace. What about you? Have you found peace? Kemi considered the question seriously. I've found something better than peace. I've found purpose. What Tun did to me was horrible, but it also taught me things about myself I never knew. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I learned that I don't need someone else's approval to know my own worth. And I learned that survival isn't enough. You have to decide what you're going to do with the life you've saved. As if summoned by their conversation, her children emerged from the back office. Funmi ran to hug Emeka, while the twins, now walking and chattering in the way of 18-month-olds, climbed onto his lap with the familiarity of children who had always known him to be safe. "Mama," Funmi said, "Uncle Emeka says he brought us something." Emeka reached into his bag and produced a children's book, a picture book about a brave princess who saved herself from a dragon. "I thought you might like this story," he told Funmi. "It's about someone who didn't wait for a prince to rescue her." As Funmi settled down to examine the book, Kemi felt a surge of gratitude for this man who had appeared in their lives at exactly the right moment and had stayed to become family. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for saving us that night, for helping with the trial, for being here when we needed someone to believe in us." "Thank you for showing me what real courage looks like," he replied. "You could have stayed hidden after that night in the forest. You could have taken whatever settlement Tund offered and disappeared quietly. But you chose to fight for justice, not just for yourself, but for every woman who might face something similar." That evening, after the children were in bed, Kemi sat on her small balcony looking out at the Lagos skyline. The city lights sparkled in the distance, and she could hear the familiar sounds of traffic, music, and life continuing all around her. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Adebayo, my husband has been threatening me and my children. I saw your interview on television. Can you help me? I don't know where else to turn." It was the fourth such message she had received this month. Her story had given other women hope that they too could survive betrayal and domestic violence. More importantly, it had shown them that they could fight back and win. She typed back immediately, "You are not alone. Call me tomorrow and we'll talk about your options. You deserve better, and there are people who will help you get it." As she sent the message, Kemi reflected on how different her life was now from what she had imagined it would be. She had thought happiness meant a perfect marriage, a beautiful home, and social approval. Now she understood that true happiness came from knowing your own worth, protecting the people you love, and using your experiences to make the world a little bit safer for others. The woman who had once been afraid to confront her cheating husband was now someone other women called when they needed courage to leave dangerous situations. The mother who had once been helpless in a forest with 3 crying children was now raising those same children to understand that they never had to accept abuse or betrayal from anyone. 2 years later, Kemi received a letter that brought the story full circle. It was from Tund, written from his prison cell. "Dear Kemi," it began, "I know I have no right to contact you, and I understand if you don't read this. But I wanted you to know that I've been getting help. Real help, not just the manipulation I used to do to get what I wanted. The psychiatrist here says I have a personality disorder that made me incapable of seeing other people as real individuals with their own needs and feelings. I used to think that meant I wasn't responsible for what I did to you and the children. Now I understand that it just means I had to work harder to choose to do right instead of wrong. I chose wrong over and over again. I chose selfishness over love. I chose cruelty over honesty. I chose violence over facing the consequences of my actions. You didn't deserve any of it. The children didn't deserve any of it. I don't expect forgiveness, because what I did was unforgivable. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand what I destroyed, and I'm sorry. I hope you and Funmi and the twins are happy. I hope you found peace. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. Tund." Kemi read the letter twice, then filed it away. She didn't respond, and she didn't dwell on it. Tund's journey toward accountability was his own to make, and she didn't need to be part of it. What mattered was that she had built something beautiful from the wreckage of her old life. Her children were healthy and loved. Her business was successful. Her advocacy work was helping other women find their own strength. Most importantly, she had learned that being abandoned in a forest by someone who was supposed to love you wasn't the end of your story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where you got to decide who you wanted to be and what kind of life you wanted to build. On a warm Sunday afternoon, 5 years after that terrible night in the Ogun forest, Kemi stood in a church in Acacia watching Emeka place a ring on her finger. Their wedding was small but joyful, attended by Mama Neka, who had become the children's beloved great-grandmother, Dr. Chaik, whose marriage had survived and grown stronger, and dozens of friends who had supported them through the difficult years. Funmi, now 9 and beautifully confident, served as maid of honor. The twins, sturdy 6-year-olds who called Emeka Papa, and had no memory of the man who had tried to kill them, carried the rings with solemn importance. As they exchanged vows, Kemi thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed her had instead taught her what real love looked like. Real love didn't turn into hatred when challenged. Real love didn't become violence when inconvenienced. Real love meant choosing to protect and cherish someone even when it was difficult. "I promise to love you not just when it's easy," she said to Emeka, "but especially when it's hard. I promise to choose honesty over comfort, courage over security, and love over fear." When he kissed her at the altar, the congregation erupted in celebration. But the most beautiful sound was her children's laughter, bright and joyful and completely unafraid. Later, at the small reception in Mama Neka's compound, someone asked Kemi if she ever regretted not handling her situation more quietly, the way her father had originally suggested. "Never," she replied firmly. "Staying silent about abuse only protects the abuser. Speaking up protects everyone who comes after you." That night, as she tucked her children into bed in their new home, the house she would share with Emeka, filled with love and laughter and safety, Funmi asked her a question that made her smile. "Mama, do you think we'll live happily ever after now?" "Baby girl," Kemi said, smoothing her daughter's hair, "we've been living happily ever after for a long time already. We just didn't realize it. Because happily ever after didn't mean nothing bad ever happened. It meant that when bad things happened, you had the strength and love and support to survive them and build something even better on the other side." The little girl who had once cried in a dark forest was now a confident child who knew she was cherished. The baby boys who had been abandoned to die were now boisterous children who understood they were wanted and protected. And the woman who had once been betrayed and nearly murdered was now someone who helped other women find their own strength and courage. The forest had been meant to be their ending. Instead, it had become their beginning. As Kemi turned off the lights and closed the door, she could hear Emeka in the kitchen, preparing bottles for their newest addition, a baby girl they had adopted the month before, whose birth mother had fled an abusive relationship with Kemi's help. Their family was growing, their love was multiplying, and their story was still being written. But one thing was certain: this story would have a truly happy ending, because it was being written by people who understood that love meant choosing to protect and cherish each other, no matter what challenges life brought. The girl abandoned in the forest had become a woman who saved others from their own dark forests. And that, perhaps, was the most beautiful revenge of all. What an incredible journey of survival, justice, and redemption. If this story moved you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they know. Comment below, what was your favorite moment in Kemi's journey? And remember, if you or someone you know is facing domestic violence, there is help available and there is hope. You are not alone, and you deserve better. Thank you for watching Tales by Ben, and I'll see you in the next story. Remember to subscribe now in order to support the channel.